وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome to the second Charlotte Muslim Forum. This forum has been coordinated by the next generation of Muslims in Charlotte as an effort to encourage unity by coming to appreciate our diverse perspectives. As you see on the panel, we have Imam Sheikh Bassam, we have Imam Naim, and we have Imam Yahya. We will be giving their introductions shortly. Before we start, just want to make sure you are aware that we have babysitting provided outside. If anyone has children they would like to go ahead and step out for a minute, please make sure that you can drop off your children and pick them up at the end. Have your cell phones turned off, just as a courtesy, as a reminder, so they do not interrupt while the imams are answering questions that you are going to be asking. And we have water bottles in the hallway. Without further ado, I'd like to ask Brother Usama to recite some ayat from the Quran.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم وعد الله المؤمنين والمؤمنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ورضوان من الله أكبر ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. I recited from Surah At-Tawbah, the chapter of repentance, ayahs 71 and 72. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the believers, both male and female, are the close protectors of one another. They command what is recognized as good, and they forbid what is unfamiliar to God's way of life. They establish prayer, give in charity, and obey Allah and His Messenger. Allah will pour His mercy down upon them, and Allah is powerful and wise. Allah has made a promise to the believers, male and female, of gardens beneath which rivers flow in which to dwell, and beautiful mansions in everlasting gardens of delight. However, the greatest delight of all is to please Allah, and that's also the great success. Sadaqallahu alayhi.
All right, before we begin, inshallah, without further ado, I'd just like to explain the rules for tonight's forum. Raise your hand if you were here a few months ago for our first forum. Just want to get an idea. Okay, mashallah, you came back. So we're doing something right? That's good. So tonight's forum is going to be a little bit different. What we have planned for you is, this is not a debate. What we're going to have is we'll have each imam answer questions one at a time, and if there is any additional information or any difference of opinion that another imam would like to add on as a response to that question, we'll allow the imam an additional 2 minutes to respond to that question and then move on. Just due to the nature and time constraints, we're not going to be able to give lengthy responses to any individual questions, so we'll just be hitting the surface. If there's additional, information or anything that you would like the imams to answer in specific, please approach them at the end individually if they allow. We will go ahead and start. I'd just like to briefly introduce the imams. I'm sure everyone is familiar with our superstars for the night, but I'd like to start with Sheikh Bassam. He is the resident scholar at the Islamic Center of Charlotte at ICC. To his left, I have Imam Naim Mohammad, who is the assistant imam at Masjid al-Shahid since 2008. He's a student of the Muslim American Logic Institute, Mali, since 2008. He served as the Arabic instructor at the masjid. He's been married for 12 years and has 2 beautiful children. Alhamdulillah, he has become a Haji since 2012. Hajj Mabruk. And then we have Imam Yahya to his left, who is the resident scholar at MAS, which is the Muslim American Society of Charlotte. He's been there for 2 years. He possesses a degree from the Islamic American University and has spent 6 years in extensive traditional study circles under many renowned scholars. And Imam Naim is filling in for actual Imam Khalil Akbar, who was unable to make it tonight due to prior commitments. So we'll start with Sheikh Bassam. We have a mic, so you can go ahead and just use that, inshallah. The first question that we have for Imam Bassam is, what are the general rules of interaction at work, school, with family and friends, when talking about gender roles with men and women?
You want to start until I start? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه. السلام عليكم everybody.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
This question is very important question because Muslims living in the West, in America, they go to job, they go to the school here and there, buy, sell, etc. And Muslim and Muslimah need to know what is the limitation, what is halal, what is not halal in interaction between male and female. In general, that's called in Arabic or Islamic terminology al-ikhtilat. Al-ikhtilat. We have 2 terminology. One of them is al-ikhtilat and one of them is al-khalwa. Al-khalwa. Al-khalwa is when a man and women by themselves in a place, certain place, nobody with them. But al-ikhtilat, when a group of men and group of women are together in some place, that's al-ikhtilat. Al-ikhtilat is allowed if we avoid or with 4 conditions. There are 4 conditions for al-ikhtilat to be allowed. The first one, if there is no khalwa between male and female or man and women by themselves. And the dalil of this, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said in authentic hadith, لا يخلو ون رجل بامرأة فإن الشيطان ثالثهما. هذا الحديث أخرجه أحمد والترمذي بسند صحيح وصححه الألباني. It is authentic hadith. The translation of this hadith, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, don't, or in general, لا يخلون رجل بامرأة. It's not allowed for a man to be lonely with a woman by themselves because a shaitan is their third. This is أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is authentic hadith. This is the first condition. The second condition is عدم التبرج. عدم التبرج من قبل المرأة. What that means? The woman, the Muslim woman, if she need to be with men in a place, certain place, she has to wear hijab and to wear modesty based on the Islamic rules, Islamic teaching. She cannot be, for example, out of the hijab or to wear or some of her body and shown is not allowed for this, regardless if there is ikhtilat or not. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in this regard, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَا تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid upon women to have tabarruj if she is with non-relative among her family. The third condition, عدم الإخضاع بالقول. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Al-Quran Kareem, فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ فَيَطْمَعَ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَضٌ وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. If a woman is talking to a man, or the opposite, a man talking to the woman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Al-Quran Kareem, is not allowed for her to speak with spoilty, I don't know, with dala, هكذا, any nice voice.
Flirtatious.
Yeah, exactly. And the last condition for this, يعني عدم الخوض فيما لا يعنيه. For example, if he need to talk to a woman, to stranger woman, foreigner woman, that's fine, as long as they are talking about something related to the selling. For example, if you are buying and selling, talk about buying and selling. You don't need to talk to her about, for example, your dress is beautiful, how is the personal issues. He has to be straight, he has to be serious, talking about the matter that he is with her for, not to anything else. He told me that my time is ended. Jazakumullah khair.
Barakallahu feek.
Would any of the other imams go ahead if you'd like to add on to that question?
Give 1 minute. How many minutes?
All right, inshallah.
How many minutes do we get?
3.
3. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Shadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa shadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum
We
salam.
thank the organizers for putting this together. This is definitely a great venue and a great topic. I just wanted to add a couple points to that. And one is that we must always remember that the Quran was revealed over 23 years to the early believers. And the message came down gradually to change their behavior. So many of the rules that we have, it didn't happen overnight. It took time. It took time for the believers to get the message and apply it to their lives. 2, we must remember that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was a mercy to all the worlds. So when we talk about gender relations and how these interactions happen, we must always think of how can we be rahmat and how can we show His mercy in these interactions. And the reason I say that is because many Muslims that may convert to Islam, they may be the only Muslim in their family. So when you come to personal interactions, whether it be with a relative, at work, the context of it is different. So when we think about interactions between men and women, we know we have Islamic adab, but we should also think about the context of the situation so that we don't offend and how we deal with each other. Because if you're a new Muslim convert, brother or sister, and you go to family reunion, we know we have to treat our families, our mothers, a certain way. And the higher principle is the etiquette of mercy than it would be to not interact. And that's even with the greeting. We know the issue of do you shake someone's hand, come up if somebody greets you. But the Quran tells us when someone gives you the greeting, you can return it equal to or better. Not that you're going to go bear hug another gender, but just the principle of trying to return that greeting better. So just think about the context of the situation, because it may change, especially here in the West. You can be a doctor, a physician, and you could be a firefighter. You run into a house, you have to save a whole family. The rules of gender don't have the same context. Why? Because the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said that actions are judged by intentions. So depending on the intent of those interactions, it becomes a matter of halal and haram with that applied. So always keep that in mind, the intent of the interaction more so than some of the others. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. Barakallahu feek. Bismillah, hamidan wa musalliyan wa ba'd. I would also like to thank everybody for allowing us to come together, and I feel honored that we can build such a rapport with the community and have a relationship with our leaders in a way that we can see this unity amongst Muslims. I would like to say that I agree with the conditions that Sheikh Bassam laid out. I wanted to clarify if it was misunderstood the meaning of khalwa. It means seclusion. Because lonely can be a state that I'm lonely, but I'm sitting with all of you and I feel lonely. You know? So seclusion meaning you're alone. together, just you. And the scholars said, because of a hadith found in Sahih al-Muslim, that if two men and one woman are together, this is not khalwa, or two women with one man, vice versa, this is not khalwa. It is with one man and one woman that are not mahram. They're not having a relationship that the Quran has defined as family, right? So that's the first point. Tabarruj is everywhere. And I think our brother Naim so beautifully explained to us how we should look at the reality of context. In the time of Mecca, for some 13 years, there was no such thing as rules of hijab, but there were the rule of zina and staying away from fornication. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. To stay away from fornication as best as you can. And as he mentioned, with the levels, the tadarruj, the slow raising of the Muslims, alhamdulillah, these rules were given. And so they fit very comfortably in a Muslim society, but we do have to look at context. We are very similar to a Meccan reality. We live in a very ignorant world of the rules and regulations. We need to build our spirituality, our hearts, and in our minds. And with that, we can build our depth of spiritual application of the laws and so forth. Also establishing ourselves as a relevant, native, spiritual expression of religion, right? In general. Once we establish ourselves as that, then when we start to introduce certain rules that might not be culturally common, people would be more prone to accepting them if we slowly worked our way into the scene as a known and respected entity. Another condition I would add to Sheikh Bassam's is the lowering of the gaze. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم. We should lower our gaze. We should not stare at something that incites desire. And the scholars have differed. Some of the scholars said looking at any part of a woman at any point in time is something prohibited. So you should always look to the side or down or way of sorts. Other scholars said no, her face and her hands are not awra, and only if there's shahwa. If there is a desire there, then you have to look away at that moment. And then to add to that, bringing in the nuance of Brother Naim, is that not touching each other. Men and women should not be touching each other unless they're mahram as well. There is certain circumstances, going back to the scholars' difference of opinion about the illah, the justification for the ruling is desire. So if there is any desire that may come, then you cannot have touching. Jazakumullahu khairan.
Jazakallah khair. I wrote two more. You mentioned no gaze, but I followed the rule. That's why I cannot. Jazakallah, that's true. And also you mentioned that the sixth, but with the desire, which is the intention. Even if you are with a million women, not only one by yourself, you can look at the women badly, with bad intention, and that's haram also. Not only to be with her lonely. Indeed, I'd like to say something regarding the Tadrij al-Ahkam. Tadrij al-Ahkam, we need to understand it right. Allah subhanahu
gradual application or gradual development of the rules of Islam in the people.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran al-Kareem, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. No tadarruj ahkam anymore. Ad-Din is completed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to his prophet in Arafah when he did the last pilgrimage, Al-Hajj, في السنة العاشرة, on the 10th of the year. Ad-Din is completed. No tadarruj anymore. But what we can do, we have to distinguish between two things. I'll give you an example to understand my point. For example, al-hijab for women. It is agreed upon or not? Agreed upon. That women should cover all her body except, as Sheikh And he said al-wajh wal-kaffayn, and al-ahnaf said also al-qadamayn. We are not talking about these differences here. For example,
face and hands, and then
yeah, exactly, yeah. Jazakallah khair. But my point is, if you are an imam and a new Muslim or not a new Muslim, a Muslim lady came to the masjid without hijab, or she's wearing not modesty, some of her body is shown. What we should do in this case? We cannot say tadarruj ahkam and tell her what you are doing is right. We cannot say that. هذا افتراء على الدين. At the same time, we cannot deal with her badly and harsh and talk to her and humiliate her and kick her out, because some imams, they did so. They did that. So what we should do in this case? Here, I have to explain to her the real Islam, al-ahkam, as is, nicely, in nice way, and tell her, sister, if you need hijab, I have hijab. I have, by the way, a few hijab in my office. And ishar or etc., etc. We have to talk to her nicely, not badly. We cannot kick her out, because if you did so, maybe he'll never come back to the masjid, or maybe she stops praying at all. It is my responsibility if she did not pray anymore. So, and at the same time, we cannot say, okay, sister, it's okay, everything is okay. You can come to the masjid, you can pray without hijab, you can pray, and the part of your body. No, هذا haram, big haram. Because now we're talking about, we're touching the tashri'ah. We cannot say that. So ad-din is completed, but we have to know how we should deal with this situation, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows better.
I have one small comment on that. Inshallah. So, just to clarify, it is the opinion of Sheikh Faisal Mawlawi, Allah yarhamu, Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya, Hafidhullah Ta'ala. These are scholars who sat on the World Councils of Islamic Law, and they headed them, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, Sheikh Salman al-Auda, Sheikh Isam al-Gharib, who teaches fiqh al-Usra in Jamiat al-Kuwait, Kulliyat al-Sharia. They take this opinion that when a new Muslim comes, if they say, I'm not ready for this thing or that thing in my faith, we can apply the understanding of the Mecca and the Madani surahs, because the reason why they were revealed and the reason why we have the seerah and we learn how these things happened is an understanding the difference between an Islamic state and one that's not an Islamic state. So those rules were set because there was an Islamic state for them to function in, that everybody is tacitly approving by their La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So in our context, if many scholars would say if a sister came and she's dressed in some sort of very revealing, obviously we'd remind her about modesty. But if she said, I'm not ready to wear the full hijab, she's perfectly okay to attend the mosque and to be there without wearing that hijab, as was the Prophet ﷺ's own daughters and wives for many years were living as such in Mecca. So this is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Wallahu a'lam. Jazakumullah khair.
Okay, moving along to the second question. We have Imam Naim. Just before Imam Naim answers the second question, there are flashcards passed around with volunteers. If you'd like to, while we are answering these questions, please feel free to write your question and submit it up. Inshallah, it will be answered. So if you need an index card, just raise your hand, and we have volunteers with cards walking around. Imam Naim, if you could please answer the following question. What are the roles, rights, and responsibilities of spouses?
3 minutes? That's a lot for 3 minutes.
MashaAllah.
Bismillah. It says,
1, 2, 3, ABC.
we'll just point out a couple things that we know that we may not always think about. One is that the role of marriage is an act of ibadah. It's an act of worship. So every facet of what you do in that relationship is worship. And if you don't see it as the same as your prayers and your fasting, you can be missing something. So you have to apply the idea that you're worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within these roles that you have. One obvious role that we know is that the men are the maintainers and providers for the sisters. So the wealth that the husband and the wife, if the wife works, that's her wealth, and any wealth that she contributes to the family is a sadaqah. But the men are responsible for providing for their sisters. And we know that the male and the female are not alike in some ways. Allah tells us that in the Quran. So yes, the male has the responsibility of leading the direction of the home, spiritually, in some ways emotionally, financially, and the sister's rights usually comes with the nurturing. If there are children, and maintaining the how the home is upkept. Those are some of the things that we know, and sometimes we need a reminder of. But the other thing I wanted to point out in the brief time is that sometimes these roles may alter. Again, we've got to think about context. And especially in this society, we have a lot of sisters who are empowered and educated who may work. So you may have some dads who are coming home, cooking meals, doing some chores, because it's a give and take. And it may not be in every case, but you have to be flexible enough in some cases. You may be someone who loves, as a male, you may be someone who loves the reading and the studying of Quran, and you cannot force that on your spouse if that's not something that she primarily likes to do. Just like you may not like to be as involved in the nurturing of the children. So we have to understand that our roles are sometimes distinct and sometimes they overlap, and that the flexibility in those must always be applied, because in today's time you may not have an exclusive situation where you're only the worker or you're only the maintainer and the educator. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Which way are we going?
Would anyone else like to add on to that?
Inshallah. So yeah, obviously we agree with Brother Naim. Just wanted to highlight the three realities that the Quran explained in defining the relationship. وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. That the first place in the Quran we find in Surah Al-Baqarah that men are commanded to live with your wives with the best standard of conduct, ma'ruf, what is all that is known to be good. And the Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرٌ لِنِسَائِهِمْ, that the best among you is those who are best to your wives. And so, unfortunately, many men understand that al-qiwama, the ayah that they are protectors and maintainers and those that are responsible and upkeepers of their family, that this is some sort of dictatorial control. And so their ego and their arrogance and their oppressive nature, the nafs al-ammaratun bisu, encourages them to take attitudes and characteristics towards their wives which is very harmful and destructive to the relationship. So that's unfortunate. It is a responsibility in the necks of all men that they do properly, with justice, with concern for the well-being of everyone, willing to own up to their own mistakes, willing to admit their faults. We should be, good leaders are known by these qualities. Then it says, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, that in the Quran it says لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, that the purpose of the spousal relationship, this marriage, this contract in front of God, is that you would live with them in peace and serenity, which means you have to have an understanding. So one of the rights that both men and women have on each other is to have a very good, friendly relationship in which they're very comfortable to talk as good, close friends would. Not these, and unfortunately in some cultures around the world, people have a very rigid understanding of marriage. And the Prophet ﷺ and all the great companions were very merciful, compassionate, fun-loving, joking, very concerned about having a good relationship. And then mawaddah, a deep loving affection should be between them, and rahmah, and a merciful, forgiving, overlooking attitude. These are the pillars of a proper marriage. So in Islam there is a structure to everything, and institutions are institutions. The marriage is an institution. Many decisions are going to be made. You cannot have two bosses, you cannot have two presidents, you cannot have two managers of a restaurant, general manager, you cannot have two principals of one school. We all agree this, everybody. So there's a head of the household. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given that responsibility to the man, and so the woman should be respectful and obedient in major issues, in matters that affect either worship, you're worshiping, then you have to obey the command of your husband, because he's trying to do what's good for you eternally. Or if he's asking you to do something, so for example with the house, that المرأة راعية في بيت بعلها وولده وهي مسؤولة عنهم, that the woman is a guardian and responsible for her husband's house and the children therein. She has a big responsibility there, and so she needs to take care of that house, make sure that she doesn't bring anybody in the house that isn't that the husband's not comfortable with, and she should not be going places without the husband's knowledge, and vice versa. A man should not be going places without the wife's knowledge, because that is the entrance of shaitan to convince people that there is wrong things happening. And so that's both sides could be afflicted with that. Obviously there's some more things, but my time ran out, so I'm sure Sheikh Bassam can add on to that, inshallah.
As Brother Naim said, it is big subject, big topic. But and I don't want to talk a lot about it, because indeed it needs special muhadara and lecture for that. But indeed the relationship between the wife and husband in the house, it is beyond the responsibilities and the duties. We should go to this, the rights and responsibilities and duties, and the case of a niza', if there is dispute, if there is disagreement, if there is a fight. In this case, well, this is your right and this is your right. This is your husband's right, etc. But the main idea of living as wife and husband, this contract, the nikah nama contract, it is based on, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and Brother Imam Yahya mentioned the verse, mawadda wa rahmah, based on any deep love and mercy and tranquility. Second, tranquility, peace of mind. We should understand each other. We have to have a mutual agreement between themselves. Not of every time in the house. Maybe they need to live together maybe 70 years. All the time you say, this is my right, this is your right. This is your duty, this is my duty. It doesn't work like that. The relationship between wife and husband should be based on love, mawadda, and rahmah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all our wives and husbands here, inshallah, and we live based on this verse, inshallah. Jazakumullah.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Just the hadith was narrated by Anas, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Messenger of Allah said, when a man marries, he has fulfilled half of his religion, so let him fear Allah for the remaining half. So marriage is half of our deen, and it's not just a nikah, it's ongoing. So once you get married, there you go, you're in the race of half of your deen by maintaining that marriage. So just something to think about. If you're not married, it's a huge incentive plan out there waiting for you to fulfill half of your deen, because you only can do half without being married. The other half is waiting for you in this institution called marriage. So,
Okay. Moving on to our third question, Imam Yahya, please answer. What is the proper course of action if someone is being abused?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. This is unfortunately a worldwide problem, coming from a non-Muslim background, being raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I have witnessed and known many non-Muslim homes that have the different types of abuses in them. Alhamdulillah, Islam and America, as a general culture, has a very good way of dealing with these things. And I think they're in agreement to a large extent. There are three types of abuse. There is, most people think of physical abuse, but there is emotional and verbal abuse, which can actually psychologically be worse in the long run. The question is the extent of the abuse. What is the actual extent of the harm that is taking place? So if we're talking about some brother that just gets very forceful, or some sister that gets forceful, I believe it, I've heard this. I've actually been in a situation where the sister was physically abusing her husband. So don't get it twisted, as they say. Yeah, so in that situation, they would bring some sort of an arbitrator, and preferably a Muslim that would first remind them, as Sheikh Bassam said, about the proper rights and duties and responsibilities according to the revelation. Some people have psychological problems. They were raised seeing abuse, and so that became part of them. They have it in their DNA, they have it in their environmental influence. So just reminding them of the religion is not good enough. So there's people that understand the science of the human brain and how it affects the development of the person, psychology, so that person can help that person dig down and figure out that problem a little better. So no one should accept to be abused. No one should assume that they are guilty if they're being abused. Islam is against oppression in all of its forms. There is a consensus of Muslim scholarship that it is prohibited to abuse or harm a spouse in any way, shape, or form. You cannot do this. And so if that happens to you, you must seek a way out of that, right? You have to get somebody to arbitrate. And if that doesn't work and it continues to happen, then you need to fix it. If the issue is a matter of physical abuse, in which a man generally is becoming violent, and he is in an angry rage, punching and hitting and kicking and pushing down, that the sister should call the police immediately. Immediately call the police. Put some fear into his heart, because there's a system that is made to stop people who believe they are the all-powerful that can do whatever they want without recompense. That person is a criminal that should be dealt with as so. And unfortunately, I've heard in my days plenty of imams that led a sister to go on for many, many years under very serious physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, and nothing was done about it. And now there's major psychological issues as a result. The kids are also ruined in their mind because they watched this growing up, and those kids are going to abuse as a result. So we should not allow this to happen. So we pray that we're all saved from such an evil, criminal way of doing things.
Just to add on to that question, Imam Naim or Sheikh Bassam, if you'd like to answer, similar to the same topic about domestic violence, is it the right of the community to know or to be informed of leaders, such as imams or shura members, that are physically or emotionally abusing their spouses and children? So does the community have the right to know if there are authoritative figures in the community that are themselves involved in this kind of behavior?
Bismillah, the Sheikh may know the hadith, but I do recall that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, relayed that another person should not be fit for marriage because he beats women. So, and during the time of the Prophet, he did relate that information that another person was physical and that may not be a suitable bait. So, I think if it's a community concern, it needs to be discussed. But it's just something that has to look at on a case by case. That's all I can. I'm not sure if I can add to that.
Bismillah. As Imam for years in America, I faced many cases, and I'd like to share my opinion in this. There is no doubt there is brothers, unfortunately, they abuse their wife physically, which is unacceptable. Even Islamically is unacceptable. And subhanallah, at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the women came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and complained about their husbands. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the minbar and delivered a khutbah, and he said, أولئكم الذين يضربون نساءهم ليسوا بخياركم. These husbands who physically abuse or hit, that the wives are not among your best, are not among your best, and they are not among the best Muslims. And when we talk about hitting ad-darb, maybe one of you said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that in Al-Quran Kareem. That's true. But the problem is the understanding of the verse and implementing and the understanding of a Sahaba and tawjih al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in this matter. I read, this is for al-mughtaribin, for us. They made for us, for Muslims living in the West, by Dr. Salah Sawi. And he mentioned the statement of the scholars that if the husband need to go the third step, فَعِظُوهُنَّ وَهْجِرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ, first you have to remind the wife if she has nushuz, and she doesn't listen, doesn't obey the husband, بالمعروف. Remind her, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. If not, هُجْرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ. That means don't sleep with her in the same bed. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned in other hadith, لا تهجر إلا في البيت. It's not allowed for the husband to leave the house and leave the woman, maybe with the young children by themselves for days. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam forbid upon husband to do so. And the third step is to hit. But if you want to translate this word, the best is discipline. And the statement that Dr. Sawi mentioned, for the scholar said, use the siwak. Do you know siwak? Siwak, you use it to clean your teeth. Because the purpose is not to show how you hate or how you are strong against women. No. But to come to your question, sister, I don't agree at all that the community at large to know about the problems. Because in al-buyuta asrar, there is secret. And that's not good for the sister herself. For others to know that her husband hit her. It's not good. The Imam, he pick, if he need somebody, he think that maybe they can solve the problem, can help to solve a problem, that's fine.
What if the person that's hitting is an Imam? I think that's what the question was asking.
The Imam abuse her.
The Imam is abusing his wife.
Did you do so, brother?
So does the community have the right to know? Or should it be left, in private?
Indeed, let us be very objective. Very objective. It depends, as the brother said, it depends the case. It depends the case. Maybe some brothers and sisters are very close to the Imam and to the wife of the Imam. In this case, that's fine. But not to any al-fadiha. What al-fadiha? To embarrassment everybody. Because in general, we have etiquette, Islamic etiquette in the problem to make it as much as you can, very limited, and little people know about it.
Let me add a little bit. The Quran also says, if any of you swerve against injustice, all of you are to force that person back to the way. So if we have an Imam that's hitting his wife in our community, we will have to address that. And he won't be the Imam anymore. That's just the bottom line. There's no third step. Because no one has brought a sound hadith of the Prophet ever hitting his wives. So you can't even, because even the daraba, when it says daraba, to strike, Allah says in Surah Anam, daraba mathalu, he strikes. He strikes an example in the Revelation. So he's not hitting us. So if the word used for daraba can be used as a third option, then what does it mean when Allah uses it? Because he says that, so I'm not sure about the third option, but you may get a visitor if that happens in our community.
I'd just like to add one point. If I agree with the brother, if an Imam or community leader is abusing his wife, the people who know about that, the wife, should go to the board and tell them, this person is doing crimes, and so I don't believe that at this current time that person should be, and I believe that person should be fired and removed from that position until they repent. So if it's something that there's years went by or long time went by and there's a clear repentance, then that person has a new reality. Should everybody know? No, because sitr is something in our deen. We should cover up the faults of our Muslim brothers and sisters when there is no benefit in saying it. When there is harm in saying it, it's ghiba and namima and all of those things. The second point, the issue of darb, the ulama have agreed that this is a mild physical reprimand, because when you look at every single tafsir available, it says darbun ghayru mudarrah. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, what does this mean? And he said, it is a non-violent physical reprimand. It is not a light beating. I'm sure you've seen the translation, it's ridiculous. Beat them lightly. That makes no sense in English language. It's not logical. It's ridiculous. And the people who made that translation should rethink what they're saying, because it is a source of major problems for the Muslims. Sheikh Abu Bakr al-Jazairi, the well-known wa'idh and teacher and scholar of Masjid al-Nabawi, when asked about this, and it's put in his Aysar al-Tafasir, his tafsir, he said, if a man knows by going to his wife, stop it, which we do have some evidence, when Aisha followed the Prophet ﷺ out all night and he poked her in the chest and said, stop doing that, right? We do have that for evidence. If you know she's going to flip out and sock you, then you wouldn't do that. So what Sheikh is saying is that i'tibar al-urf mu'tabar. Yani, if you look into the situation of the culture and how people would deem that. So that verse was revealed in a cultural context in which a man would be much older than most times the woman that he is marrying. And she sees herself as leaving the guardianship of her father and being under the guardianship of her new husband who's in charge of her. That was a cultural reality, right? Now there's a different cultural reality in which this verse might not have any benefit at all. Therefore, because the illah, the ruling, the wisdom, justification behind it is not there. And so it might not have an application there. Wallahu alam. Anyone who hits a woman to physically harm her is a coward. That's, I think, nobody should accept that. And we should all, as the brother said, if we know about this, do everything we can to stop that brother, call him to repentance. And if he's a leader of the community in any way, board member, imam, whatever, that person should be removed from their position. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, Sheikh Bassam, how do Muslims meet a spouse if they want to get married? If they have no help from their family, they have nobody, how can a sister or brother find a husband or a wife and get married?
I don't know. Don't count until I understand the question. What do you mean by she doesn't have wali? She doesn't have any...
She may be non-Muslim.
Okay.
Or maybe her family's not supporting her.
No, you can stop. Al-Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he said, Al-Imam waliyu man la waliya lah. If you are a ruler or imam and judge, whatever, is the wali for anybody doesn't have wali. And they said, Al-Imam, the imams in the West, also they play the same role with some observation. I do believe that imam here in the West cannot be exact like judge or ruler, but he has a big portion of this right. So Al-Imam can play this role for the sister if she doesn't have a wali, doesn't have a brother or Muslim father, etc.
So anyone that wants to get married can approach Imam.
Any imam.
Any imam. Would any of the other imams like to answer that question? How do single Muslims that don't have support from family or they don't have a wali, how do they find the marriage companion?
The only thing I would add is try to find a good community that has maybe a singles program, or try to surround yourself by other good Muslims, because we are the brother, we are a mirror to each other. So you may have to find another good Muslim brother or sister to help you find a mate. I don't want to say go on eHarmony, because you have a tough time sorting through the Muslims on that sometimes.
Alhamdulillah, I know of various very successful marriages that happened from finding a spouse on the internet. On the other hand, I know of very big failures that happened as a result. So you should be careful with what you do. And that's why we have the wali. The concept of the wali that the Prophet ﷺ says, لا نكاح بدون ولي, كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, that there would be no marriage without a guardian to look into the sister's best interest, trying to make sure, if say for example she comes from a non-Muslim family, then whoever it is, the imam or the one that she has designated, needs to be treating her like that's my daughter or that's my sister. And the one that comes, if that person's shady in any way, you got to tell her, I don't think you should marry this guy. And we do that often. So I think that we should have more of a structured system here in Charlotte, and I think this may be an opportunity to do this, because we have various people that are looking. That one thing needs to be clear is it is not in anyone's best interest to go around looking to meet people in school or anywhere else in order to find a spouse. Because that is the way shaitan is going to fool you, making a relationship that was not oversaw by the reality that marriage is the goal, because people are involved from family or from the wali, and it's a very serious, and what we call running game does not get involved.
Okay, Imam Naim, what are the rules for marrying a non-Muslim? And can a Muslim woman marry a non-Muslim? If yes, please explain.
For a Muslim male, they have to be Ahlul Kitab. They have to be a sister of the book who is practicing. You can't just use the general, I'm spiritual. Well, she's a spiritual sister. You want to try to. She needs to be someone who believes in God and is religious. For the sister marrying a non-Muslim man, that's not permissible, in my understanding, because of the rights that a Muslim woman would have in the marriage. If you marry someone who's not in Islam, you compromise your own rights, because he can treat you according to whatever view he's following. So and think about context. Everybody, even in the South, let's say here, is religious, but still you have to do some additional due diligence if you're pursuing a Christian or a Jewish sister. You can't just say, well, everybody goes to church here, so I'm good. You may have to do some additional research, and that research may lead you that we have plenty of beautiful Muslimah here in Charlotte and other cities, so invest home instead of going abroad.
MashaAllah.
Oh, you want to?
On this subject, with regarding a Muslim sister marrying a non-Muslim, there is a consensus amongst the scholars for the history of our ummah. Unfortunately, there are some what we would call rogue, mostly university type guys, Western university, highly influenced by the Orientalist theories and ideas. And so you will hear and you may see on the internet, and this is why we should not take our deen from the internet. We should make sure we attend Sheikh Bassam's lectures, Sheikh Imam Khalil or Naim, or whoever else it may be. We need to attend the lectures, we need to read the books that come from respected scholars, we need to listen to the tapes. We should not take our deen from the internet, because you will see fatwa that is coming from a person that may or may not have the quality of fatwa, but they do not have the recognition of someone who can make ijtihad. Making a fatwa and making an ijtihad are two different realities. Wallahu alam. Yani it's passing on some information as to the rules of Islam to someone so that they can know how to worship properly. That's a fatwa. Ijtihad is to say, I have now decided that this is the new reality, and nobody else said that before me, but here it is. And that a Muslim woman marrying a non-Muslim man, that fatwa is not recognized by any established institution or scholarly body or major scholar in the world. Now, on the subject of a Muslim man marrying a non-Muslim woman, Ahl al-Kitab, the Jews and the Christians, as the brother said, muhsanat is the actual word in the verse. It means that they have to be people of religiosity. They have to believe in the oneness of God. They have to have a certain chastity and basic preservation of their honor and their chastity. They cannot be someone that is very risque, obnoxiously interacting with any person without any sort of character, because that's just going to open the door for a very unfortunate reality. So in the Muslim countries, most of the scholars said that it is allowed, mubah. But here, many of the ulama are saying it's makruh. And some people tried to say, well, you're differing with the ayah, but the ayah was revealed in the end of Medina in the context of an Islamic state when the people of Ahl Kitab were being accepted as non-Muslim citizens of the Islamic state, where Islam will be very strong and influential in that situation. Here in America, I have come to know of dozens and dozens of brothers who were Muslim that married a Christian sister and he went to Christianity. Or all his kids, or some of his kids, went to Christianity, atheism, or whatever else. Because of that established reality, particularly with people who don't have a strong religion, I would agree that it's makruh. And also from the standpoint of we have many sisters who are not able to find brothers because many of the brothers are choosing to marry from a non-Muslim sister. So, wallahu alam, this is,
Imam, on that note, Imam Yahya, just let's throw a spin on there.
Okay, bismillah.
All right. If a man's already married to a Muslim and he wants to marry a second wife, can he marry a non-Muslim?
Well, see, I come from the ayah. It says that وَإِن لَمْ تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً, that if you cannot make justice between in polygamous relationship, then you can only have one wife. Now, what is justice? Justice is a concept that's guaranteed by courts. And here we don't have an Islamic court, and we have many states that are now completely removing, and by the way, North Carolina, it just happened, where they're removing the Islamic arbitrational means. So I am personally of the position that in America it is prohibited for a man to take a second wife at all, because he cannot be just if the second wife cannot have her rights guaranteed to her in a court of law, because it is breaking the concept of justice conditionally put in the verse. So for those scholars, because there are scholars who do believe and they understand it that it's his responsibility and the Muslim community's responsibility to establish that justice. But for me, justice is a concept that is enforced in a court of law, which a second wife will never have in the American reality. So she cannot be dealt with justly according to law. But if you're going to go along with the opinion that says he can, the same rule applies. Non-Muslim or Muslim, depends on if you see it as makruh, which I personally view it's makruh to take a non-Muslim, a Ahl al-Kitab wife here in America. Wallahu a'lam.
I think you just broke a brother's heart right now.
Astaghfirullah.
Sheikh Bassam, would you like to respond to that question?
On everything, case-to-case situation, fatwa is not just given out to everyone by one thing. I'm giving you a general, based upon experience idea.
Either one about marrying non-Muslim.
Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he said, I dislike for the Muslim living in non-Muslim country to marry from among the both, because she had the upper hand. She had the power here. That his what he mentioned, the reason of that. And also as the Imam and the experience that we faced, I highly dislike for a Muslim man to marry a woman from the people of the book in the West. Allah Ta'ala alam. For the right that Imam Yahya mentioned, if the second wife accept, as Sauda bint Zum'a radiallahu ta'ala anha, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she gave or sacrificed her night to Aisha radiallahu anha, only she want to stay with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as his wife and to be his wife in Jannah. If she accept and she تنازلت ايش التنازل يعني
she gave up her right.
Give up some of her right, and there is an agreement, that's fine. And by the way, I asked a lawyer maybe 1 week ago, not long time ago, that the second wife, if as long as he's doing it Islamically only, the court has nothing to do and the legal with
Like
that.
girlfriend.
Allah, exactly. He said the same word. Allah Ta'ala.
Imam Naim, does the husband have to provide for wants as well as needs for his wife, such as boxing lessons,
MashaAllah.
coach bag, visit to the
Yes.
Bahamas?
Yes, but the roles can be reversed. His wife may have some type of martial arts expertise that she's providing too to teach him. So we don't want to assume, but yes, you should provide as best as possible.
Imam Yahya, should the husband be the only provider? If the husband is unable to provide, and I'm assuming it's financial here, if the husband is unable to provide, can the wife also be a provider?
Yes, I think Brother Naim touched on that earlier. The ayah, the verse talking about الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. This ayah is conditionally giving the responsibility of authority and leadership and caretaking to the man. So there's an interesting point that I have heard of many women who embraced Islam just because they came to know about this. That Islam, contrary to the common image that they're trying to convince everybody, Islam is, we won't say spoiled, but Islam is treating a woman very, very specially. She's never responsible for a penny in her life according to Islamic law. If she is in her father's house, he has to take care of her. He cannot, with all due respect, fathers. The father cannot ask the daughter to go to work for the purpose of taking care of any financial responsibilities for herself or for him. If she so wants to work to learn discipline and he encourages her and she wants to do that, that's fine. So if she's married, now say for example in Islamic law, wallahu alam, and somebody could correct me if I'm mistaken, that if a man is a construction worker, hard-working man, working with his hands, doing good, and he's making $30,000 a year, and he marries a sister who is a doctor, who makes $150,000 a year. In agreeing to marry the brother, she has to know that she has to be willing to live according to his means. And he is responsible for every single part of the nafaqah. He has to have the house, the transportation, the clothing, the medicine, the basic needs, the cosmetics, or whatever it may be, all of these type things. He has to do it. He cannot ask her. But as the Shaykh mentioned, many of the ulama are agreeing that al-aqd, aqd. So, قابل للشروط. A contract is accepting conditions. المسلمون عند شروطهم, as one of the narrations mentioned. So if she agreed at the contract that I'm going to pitch in as a supporter of this household, she's doing that, and that does not give her authority. She's now agreed because this is a responsibility that God has put on the neck of the man to be the final decision maker. And the responsibility of being the main caretaker and raiser of the children is on the woman. And he should not be trying to tell her how to do that, because that's her responsibility as outlined in the hadith. Wallahu a'lam.
Imam Bassam, how should a Muslim man handle working with any women in the workplace?
With the same condition we mentioned before. First, he has to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, he has to be serious when he's dealing with them. Third, he has to gaze as much as he can. And if he should look with, to be serious, not look with bad intention, with desire. And talk to them normally. They shouldn't go beyond this, talking about stuff, bring the desire and bring the shubha, the doubt. This is in general. The same condition what we said. It is okay. No problem,
Would you like to ask, or you can even switch the question about how does a Muslim woman interact with lots of men in the environment, in a workplace?
Looking at the first side of it, well, if the brother's single, then I think it really is a due diligence on that person's part to get that incentive program, to find yourself a good Muslim wife. Because you're going to, the Prophet said, this is the way that the believers are to protect themselves. They protect themselves from their desires by being married. That's not, and the spouse is a covering for you, both for the male and for the female. So, this is 2013, and it's not easy out there. It doesn't look like it does when you go to Hajj, when you go to work. It's summertime, so if you're in a setting where it's difficult for you, and you're a younger person with means, you got to step forward and try to find yourself a good spouse. That is the primary way, because you're going to be distracted even if you're going to see people, even as a married person. But at least you can seek refuge in Allah, and you have a spouse, you have some hope, some comfort. But if you're someone that says, if you're on the inshallah plan, like some of the Hajj people that go to Hajj, inshallah in 2020 I'll go. You can't be on that plan as a single male. I can only look at it from a male perspective. That's not the good plan. You want to be on a, inshallah, if Allah blesses me to meet someone tomorrow, I'm going to take care of business. But you still have to have khashiyah. You have to be fearful and mindful of the situation. You have to be in reality. You have to know the reality. You can't say, I got my taqwa, I'm going to go to the after party at work. Or if you're traveling in business, I got my taqwa, I'm going to go down to the lounge and view it. You have to know that, you have to just know that not everybody are believers. And other people aren't going to protect your interests. So first have taqwa, and second have khashiyah.
I think it's important that as Muslims here living in a non-Muslim environment that we understand the balance, because that's the condition by which we will become true witnesses for Islam. As is mentioned, كَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. As some of the ulama that are looking into the wisdom behind the ruling of a minor touch, like a handshake or something like that, and they said if there is desire there, then it's a problem. If you can do it without desire, then it's not a problem. You have various high qualified scholars throughout the history of Islam who said that. Now that's in passing. You're in a situation where somebody that you're not going to interact with in the future, but you have a situation coming and you're going to make that very awkward and give a first impression about Islam that you are, a weird person that doesn't understand culture and things like this. So many of the ulama are giving that facilitation. Now if you're going to go work with somebody, or you're going to go to a school, I know it's hard, trust me, I've been there. But you have to set a standard. You have to let your boss, your employees, your co-workers, the people you go to school with know that I do not have physical mingling with the opposite gender. I'm not going to give you that friendly hug or handshake every time I see you. And that's my respect for chastity in your personal space. I have a strong belief system about preserving chastity. And that's a concept that I think anybody would agree to preserve. So I think if you're working with people and you're going to be interacting with them more than one time, and you're going to be around them on more than one occasion, then you need to set that as a standard that I'm not going to be alone with you in this situation. If somebody came and said, I need to talk to you about this real quick, and there's people coming in and out, you can close the door for a second. But if you know there's going to be some other time, which there should not be many times in which a man is dealing with a woman who is not a mahram, right? So we have to balance. We have to see, weighing out the benefit and the harm, and we have to set a standard when we're accompanying people that we will generally be around, that they know that Islam is a valuable system. I will tell you a funny story. I'm about out of time here. There was a lady, I won't say her name, she's a pastor, minister at a Christian church in South Florida. I was invited to an interfaith seminar, and I explained to her before we came, because she wants to do this every year and she wants to talk with me. I said, well, we as Muslims, we have these values where we don't want to have physical mingling because we want to just keep it very comfortable and chaste. She said, okay, that's fine. So she introduced the crowd and said, here's the Muslims, don't touch them. It was very strange. Right. So then she sat down, and I was trying to advise her, because I felt the way she did that was a little bit humiliating for us. And so I said, well, I'm asking you, Jesus and Mary, peace be upon them, what was their standard? Weren't they very modest people? I said, I'm asking you a question. Could anybody ever end up fornicating that didn't shake hands first? They'll never fornicate. If they're not even going to shake hands, how are they going to ever end up fornicating, right? There's khutuwat of shaitan. It's a step. It comes by little. Nobody just jumps off, throws their clothes off in the middle of the street and start humping on each other. We have to be honest with ourselves. It's a step process. And as Muslims, we need to know not to follow in those footsteps. So then, her humility kicked in. And I was very impressed with this pious lady who went up and apologized to the whole entire crowd and said, I was offensive to Muslims. And to be honest with you all, those of you that know me for the last 10 years, I would probably still be married if my previous husband was a practicing Muslim. Which you can figure out what that means.
Okay, Imam Naim, this is my question.
Set up or something?
It's for all the imams. There's a dichotomy that exists in our society where I feel that the brothers and sisters act a certain way when they're in masjid property, and they act a certain way when they're off the property, in regards to gender relations. So, Brother Ahmed, when he comes, and this is just typical, there's not any Ahmed on the front.
Zayd.
Brother Zayd. Brother Quran, right? When he's at the masjid, he lowers his gaze. He walks into walls because he's trying to avoid sisters. He will run out the parking deck as soon as Jum'ah khutbah finishes to avoid the haram and the fitna in the masjid where the women are covered and they're modest and they're humble. Yet, Brother Quran, when he goes to work or he goes to Harris Teeter or he goes to his community swimming pool, he interacts with the women that are non-covered in a politeful, dignified, respectful way, opening doors for them, acknowledging their presence, doing small talk on the elevator. So how do we strike that balance of where sisters and brothers can not have this double role that they're living?
Dawah purposes.
Yeah, dawah purposes. It's difficult. One is, it's again the context. And this society does not make it easy for us in our interactions because, people don't dress modestly. And you do get one glance. So you have to know yourself and you have to know how to govern the relationships and you have to deal with it, be true to yourself. Because yes, when you go to the masjid, things, you're one way. But when you go to work, you go to Harris Teeter, you may be totally different. You may interact differently. And that's just, it's difficult. You have to just know yourself and try to be mindful of being obedient to Allah and knowing that you're a human. And you got to be motivated to try to find a spouse. Because that's if you're single, and you're in these situations, it's going to be difficult to lower your gaze. And that one look that you get, it should be like a short look, it's going to be a long look. So, the only thing I can suggest is just to try to know yourself, know what your challenges are, and try to stay pious and stay humble.
Check this out. What do you do or say when your spouse is asking you to do something haram? So your husband is telling his wife to do something that she knows is not allowed in Islam. Does she listen to him and do the sin? Or does she not listen to him or ask, what is she supposed to do in that situation?
You ask a general question, I'll answer in general too, unless you give me examples. Because sometimes you said haram, maybe it is not. But since you say haram, I'll suppose that it's haram. الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. There is no any makhluk, any human should listen and obey anybody else if this body asks him to do haram. No, she cannot. It is her right. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed His sharia to women as to men, not only to the men. The women, they should follow sharia and in Islam the same thing like the men. وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He say, "Oh, you who believe," He didn't say men, he didn't say women. Include both. Include both. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered believers to pray, men and women, to fast, men and women. So she is human, هي كائن يعني independence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge her on the day of judgment by herself. So she cannot listen to her husband if he ordered her to do haram. But now the gap is, what is this? It depends the situation. Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, I think in the reality of and I wanted to talk a little bit about what Naim was asked. In the reality of a sister who's being, it might be as the Sheikh said, that either there's a difference of opinion, which we should all seek knowledge. We should not assume that whatever I learned on one occasion, or that we're all scholars and that we know everything. So there might be a difference of opinion, and if it could be that the man doesn't know that he's doing haram. So before we make it into World War III, into the house, we need to be relaxed in the way we explain that. Maybe like this is an issue that comes up. The sister is following an opinion from Sharia, from an established scholar or madhab, and the brother is following a different opinion, right? Does his opinion overpower her opinion? The scholars differ. I personally believe that the sister has the right to follow her opinion, and he cannot. Because al-fatwa ghir mulzam. You cannot say, because I say so. Because you're muqallid and she's muqallid. You're following and she's following. So they can both follow whichever opinion is there. Once again, has to be from established madhab, or from the scholarly bodies, or from a well-known, internationally respected scholar, before you're not going to say, well, the guy in Georgetown said so, or UCLA. We'll be careful before we take an Orientalist style approach. It may be that Sherman Jackson is the one that said it, and in that case, you can follow it because he's a well-known scholar. But many of those people you got to be careful with. So that's that. I wanted to also just kind of touch on what Brother Naim was asked about this attitude. The way she posed the question, it kind of seems like in some cases some people might be a little bit fake in the mosque. When it's like, okay, there's women and men should be completely separated, never to see each other, never to interact with each other in any way, shape, or form. Otherwise, hell has frozen over. It's the end of the world. This is terrible. In the Prophet ﷺ's mosque, there was some interaction. In the Prophet ﷺ's life, there was much interaction, ikhtilat, as we started with. As Muslims, we follow the conditions that we had. There's nothing wrong. The beginning ayah, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ مَعَ بَعْضٍ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. Men and women should be interacting in doing khair, and doing good, as Sheikh Bassam also mentioned earlier. So there should not, with all due respect to this idea of fitna, this very general word that's thrown around like it's some defined exact reality. What is fitna? Is fitna that a guy looked at a girl? Fitna is shaddu min al-qatl in the Quran. It's worse than murder. So I think fitna is when we know that people have found out that there are various boyfriend-girlfriend relationships that spawned because these people have been talking in the mosque. If that was established, that you have a group of these things happening, then I agree with the opinion. As one of my scholars, when I asked him about why we all left the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ across the world, in which men and women prayed together in the same hall with no barrier, he said, well, it actually did start to happen because of ghira. That's the man is jealous because this other man looked at his wife, and now they're come to blows in the mosque. So they said, we need to remove this situation because sadda dhari'ah. We need to stop the means to harm. I didn't find that, nor did I find the girlfriend and boyfriend problem in our mosque. So we went back to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, who is the best example for anyone to follow. So I think we should be easygoing, relaxed, laid back. No touching. Well, there was a brother came in one time and he put his hand around a sister's shoulder. And I was like, what are you doing? This is completely unacceptable behavior. So that's where we would make a rule. And I don't think we should remove the sisters from benefiting and feeling like they're an equal part of the center just because some guy was looking at her. That's his problem. He needs to lower his gaze, and it doesn't harm her at all that he looked at her. There's no harm that happened to her as a result. So she should not be prohibited from the khair that she can take. Wallahu alam.
Why is the divorce rate in the Ummah so high? And how does the Muslim, this is an easy question. How does the Muslim marriage, and how do we prevent that? Why is the divorce rate so high for Muslims?
A few months ago, I read a report that the Jordan, the most high rate of divorce in the Arab countries. It is amazing. It is surprised me. I don't know why. But in general, subhanAllah, as I mentioned earlier, the rights and the duties between the wife and the husband, we should go to it in the case of dispute and disagreement and fight, etc., etc. I do believe, strongly believe, that the marriage is not only desire. Marriage, it is a contract. If you want to establish a business with a friend, with anyone, there is a contract. And you should read the contract. If you sign without reading, and I faced that few cases in our community, said, we start with barakah. I said, it's not barakah, it's fawda. It's chaos, it's not barakah. Chaos. Al-barakah is to follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَسْأَمُوا أَن تَكْتُبُوهُ صَغِيرًا أَوْ كَبِيرًا إِلَى أَجَلٍ. To follow Sharia is the barakah. Give me more time to answer this, please. So, brothers, this is most important contract. It is between two humans. It's not for business, for money, for stuff. It's between life, woman and man. So they have to know the rules of Islam. They have to learn before they get married. And I suggest long time ago, for if there is a fiancé, man and women want to marry, they have to attend special class. Yeah. They have to attend special class. And some communities, some center, they do it. They have to know what's my right and what's my responsibility. Only in the case of dispute. So because they think that marriage is in the Ramada or in Hilton, Milton, to do all what they think about which kind of car you want to buy with me, which kind 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, and marriage is not like that, sisters. Believe me, this is secondary. The respect and to know what's your right, what's your duty, because we do not know. They don't know. Only they go, it is handsome, mansam, etc. Doesn't work, brothers. This is the reason. Wallahu alam.
Assalamualaikum. Here's a real question for you. How many of you in the audience have a smartphone? Raise your hand. How many of you have the Quran on your phone? How many have Pandora on your phone? Pandora? Good. That's good. How many have Netflix?
We do.
You got some Netflix? Okay. So the point is that we have to be rooted in reality. These things, this technology is affecting how we perceive even the institution of marriage. If you are in 2013, I'm sure you've seen the shows, the TV shows that are presenting what a wife should be like and what a husband should be like. And those things many times begin to creep into our minds. We may not appreciate our spouses as servants of Allah because we are contaminated with the ideas and images that we get from TV. And we have to, if we don't look at that as an honest possibility that I'm either choosing this person or not choosing this good sister, like the Prophet said. He said you should marry the one with faith even above wealth and beauty. If we don't have that perception going in, once we get in, we can let the other variables in this life contaminate us. And you can be fixated on the real wives of whatever city and not your wife. And then you can have a problem. But so the challenge and the key is to just, if you want to build the institution, is to look at it as this is an act of worship. When the law calls it back, whenever that is, if they can say, well, this brother was married for 20, 30, 40 years, that's the achievement. If you can do that, through the difficulties, through the differences, that's not that you may not make it or you may get remarried, but just appreciate it as an act of worship, and you're getting that account every night, direct deposits, every day, everything you do, patience, obedience. These things are just going into your account. If you have that perception, and we can lower the divorce rate. That's the way.
Yahya, while you answer that question.
No,
I wanna
I'll just
add-
take the next one. Yeah.
Okay, well, it was kind of related to that.
Okay.
Is divorce a bad thing?
The hadith that is very in the culture of Muslims, they have made this hadith muttafaqun alayh, that it says that the most disliked allowed thing is divorce to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That hadith is weak. It has issues in it. It's not an acceptable hadith to take as authoritative. The Prophet ﷺ actually divorced Hafsa. Okay? The Sahaba divorced their wives. وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Are you now going to say they were doing something wrong? I don't think we should say that. What we should say is that divorce is something that you do not think about when angry with your spouse. Pay close attention. You do not think about divorce when you're angry with your wife or your husband or vice versa. Divorce is something that would come after وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ إِنْ يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. You would bring a arbitrator from both sides to look into the situation. And you would try to help, and you would advise, and you would take time for implementation. If after many attempts at that, and over a reasonable amount of time, there is not a way to fix the situation, Islam legislates divorce. And at that time, a man, as one of my teachers, Sheikh Abdul Warith, Allah yarhamu, used to say, with some people there, well thought out, in a very sane, calm, relaxed way, he will tell her that I respect you, I love you, but I think we need to leave this relationship. And then in Islam, there is a structure to, if there's a possible way to fix it, it's called talaq raj'iyya. Now this is going to start a 3-month situation where they're living together. They're still living together. But the situation is they're both making istikhara. They're praying for God's decree and His guidance and wisdom in their lives to look into the situation. And so if during that 3 months, he doesn't say, you know what, let's take another shot at this, or he does not approach her as a wife physically, then in that case it will become what we call talaq ba'in. It is a done, there's no, the marriage would be completely separate. They need to leave each other's presence, and the only way they would be able to come back is that they agreed to a new contract. This can happen 3 times. After the 3rd time, if there's a 3rd divorce decree, and the stronger opinion amongst the major opinion amongst the scholars is it has to be at 3 different occasions with an actual ruju', with a call back. If that happens, then that is a done marriage pretty much. I mean, unless the reality was that she went and married somebody else and they lived as a husband and wife, and then she got divorced, and then they found each other again and they wanted to do it, get married there, then that's the only case, which is very unlikely that would happen. So that's divorce. It should never be thought about because I'm angry with you or you're angry with me, and divorce. Some brothers have a sickness, going back to the same idea that they were given a responsibility, not given dictatorial, authoritative control. Many brothers throw on, I'm going to divorce you if you keep doing that, I'm going to divorce you. Divorce. That is wrong. That's not muru'ah. That's not a correct character and manner of a Muslim man. And a sister should not be like, I'm going to do khula if you do this and that and the other, which we've heard that as well, to be honest with you. So this is something that, as a last resort, after reasonable attempts, whether it be counseling or scholarly advice, then divorce is there. And there's nothing wrong. There's no sin in it. I don't know of any scholar that ever said that there's a sin in divorce. Wallahu a'lam.
Just on that note, I think some people in the community see counseling as taboo.
Yeah.
Like, you must have a mental problem, or you must have a physical or spiritual deficiency for a man to come up to the Imam and say, I need counseling for my marriage. Are the community centers, are the Imams, are your masajids offering pre-marriage or post-marriage or pre-divorce or counseling sessions? And where can people go for concerns?
I 100% agree with Sheikh Bassam's advice, and I think we need to all make a very serious attempt to make that a Charlotte system. That anyone that wants to get married, they must sit down and go through a premarital counseling with an Imam who knows about what it means to build an Islamic family and what is to be expected and how to deal with those things when they come up, so that we don't have to have this counseling after. And the next point we said, many of our scholars are saying now that if the spiritual advice does not work, many scholars are now saying it's an obligation to go to a professional psychologist who is trained in marital counseling in order to see if maybe there's a problem in human behavior and the mind that is only known through a scientist who has studied that science. Just like if somebody came to me and asked me what's the ruling on this and it has to do with physical health or science, I'm going to call up the doctor and say, doctor, what is it? If they do this type of birth control, what harm might happen? And then they explain to me, and then all of that, then I can tell them what, but I can't say that. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor. Scholars should not be acting like counselors in the professional sense. In the sense of advice, irshad, nasiha, that's our job, we'll do that. But in many cases that doesn't work because, as I said, many people have problems in their marriages because they witnessed problems growing up in marriage. And so they need somebody who's a professional, knows how the human mind and the behavior is developed, might need to help them figure out their situation. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I know nobody's crazy. That's just a science amongst sciences. Wallahu a'lam.
As the American said, for your information, more than 60% of my time in the job as an imam is for the family problems.
Sheikh Bassam, what if someone wants to get married tomorrow? What is the rule for the Katb al-Kitab, the nikah contract, and the mahar? What are the rules for marriage? You have 2 minutes.
Okay, if tomorrow you want to let him come to ICC, I'm ready for that. Now start. Inshallah, what he need and what she need. Do you know that the Islamic marriage, there are many conditions, شروط الزواج يعني والعقد. Number one is al-qabul wal-ijab, and both they have to accept this, the women and the man. And other thing that I don't know what you meant as bring, for example, picture ID something or Islamic rules. Let me mention everything.
Yes.
Inshallah. Add 1 more minute. Inshallah. So first, they have both to be there. Number 2, acceptance from both parts. Number 3, the father or any guardian. If there is none, the imam should be. Or she can appoint a decent brother from the community to be her wali. And the mahar, which is the dowry, I believe they call it in English. And that's it, all this, what they
Can you
need.
explain the mahar?
The mahar, the dowry, you want to explain? The dowry, it is such amount or could be anything, could be mushaf, could be ring, could be money.
$1 million?
Could be $1 million if he can afford it. Because if he's like طلال بن شو اسمه هذا؟ طلال بن ايش؟ طلال شو اسمه الامير طلال بن فيصل الوليد بن طلال for example, he can give 1 million as if you give $100. Can be. But of course, if the dowry is low, it is closer to the sunnah, no doubt.
Imam Naim?
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yes, sure.
If a brother, if they showed up tomorrow, we would at least want to know that there's some due diligence is done on both sides first before we get into, because they can have all the technical requirements, but we may not know the brother and what his situation is, and she may not have, we may not know the sister. So hopefully you don't want to just appoint a wali on the spot, because you can't be a wali on the spot if you don't know that person. You can't protect someone's interests if this person just showed up from somewhere and is trying to marry one of the sisters in our community. So we may tell you to come back next week after we've had a couple times to talk to you and the other person.
Actually, believe me, they don't come until they prepare everything. They want the imam only to do the...
Yeah. Personally, I prefer they go to the court and going back to the justice. I prefer that they go bring the Sheikh Faisal Mawlawi, Allah yarhamu, he mentioned that توكيل العقد لحفظ الحقوق. He said that if you come to America, the only way that you're going to guarantee that your rights will be properly taken care of, you have to get it registered in the state. So in very few cases where I feel that maybe fornication may happen, and I'm very convinced, which unfortunately some of the young people come and say, come on man. Sometimes I believe them, sometimes I bring the parents in and maybe we can take cars and phones and everything away from them. But I think that that's one thing that I would do, and I agree with Naim very strongly that we need to make sure, because some sisters are preyed on. There's some brothers that have been through like 10 sisters in the last year. I've met situations like this, and she doesn't know that. Or some brother that has a very bad history. Or some brother, if you talk to his family, you'll find this brother has a major anger problem, and he didn't explain that. He's all nice and sweet on the phone, mashallah, on the text message, on the email or whatever. So we got to be very careful before we go along with that.
Now, marriage is half the deen, I think you mentioned. Does that mean if I am still single, I'm not fulfilling half of my deen? Concern some people.
You can fulfill half, or you can be fulfilling your deen, but you increase the other half through that fulfillment of marriage. So you can be a great Muslimah, doing all, fulfilling all 5 pillars, but you increase that through the idea of marriage. Because once you get married, that's when the challenges start. You may be a patient person living in your own single apartment, never have any interaction with anybody else. Add a spouse to that. See how patient you are. You may be a very charitable person, but now you have to be married, and let's see how charitable you are now. When you have children and kids, and no more guys' night out and girls' night out. So the institution of marriage is such a test for us as couples, that it gives you the opportunity to grow as a Muslim and to really fulfill what Allah wants for us as humans.
Can I say one thing to that real quick? I was sitting with one of the teachers one day, and I asked him this question, and he just basically said that zawj or zawaj is talking about 2 things becoming paired. So what I think the Prophet ﷺ, wallahu alam, is saying here is that when you marry, you became part of a 2-halved one, whereas before you were the whole thing. You see what I'm saying? So now you have to treat the other side of that marriage just like you would treat yourself, do unto others. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, that you would not be a true believer until you love for others. But obviously, if you become married, now you would see your wife as half of you, of the one that is you, this married thing. So, wallahu alam, that may be the meaning.
I think you might have hit your turn. Is there a way to take a break from marriage without getting divorced?
MashaAllah, the American culture attack.
Just a break.
Yeah. So she's asking about separation. Is there separation allowed in Islam? Well, it goes to the issue of mu'ashara and the rulings of the ulama about living together and physical contact, and there's difference of opinion amongst the 4 madhabs on that. Obviously, I don't have a time to go through all of those, but we'll just say that if we find in trying to help a couple that is going through problems that they need to split up while married, in a way that he still has to take care of everything for her, and she can't, it's not in her best interest to go live somewhere by herself without that care, unless she's older and mature and she has family and friends close, or in as a dorm and things like that, or within the same area. So I would say, we have to be careful on the separation idea. I personally have never advised to it. I've been asked to advise to it, and I've said that this is right now you're in jihad. Marriage and keeping it sound is a lifelong struggle. For all of you younger folks out there, it's different. Our religion is different from the American culture, and here's where we have to define ourselves, our identity. The American culture says you fall in love and then you get married. And why a lot of those divorces are happening in our culture here in America is because, well, they're just so lovey-dovey, and then they got married and they're like, man, you do this, you do that, and they have to live in the same house, and you think like that, and you say like this, and this is what you do with your free time, and they're like, I don't like you anymore, right? Because there wasn't a serious concern about what happens after marriage, right? Islam is the exact opposite. There is no falling in love. This is completely unacceptable. This is a wrong relationship. There is ta'aruf, getting to know, and if it happened to be, which let's be realistic, you might find a sister that you've interacted with, and there's been some interaction on a general professional level. So you would go to the family and you would talk to them to try to bring some sort of reality of a relationship from there. So I think that we need to be careful about how we understand marriage, because it's a struggle. It's a fight. You got to make sure that you and your wife know that Satan is your enemy, not each other. Mawadda and rahma means you keep live and let live, forgive and forget, right? Sometimes people can get hysterical, and that's normal. You get a little bit upset, voices get raised, but don't become historical. Don't become historical. Remember when you did that, and I can't ever forgive you. That's not the attitude that a Muslim should have. So I have to stay away from you for this long. I don't like the concept. I think we should use Islam to fix our problems amongst ourselves.
If you and your spouse want to wait to have children, is it allowed, is it permissible in Islam to use birth control just to wait to have children?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I read long time ago many fatwa from Al-Azhar. They used to have majalla, newsletter for that. And they talk about it, and they make it permissible to have birth control. But if somebody decides, I don't want kids at all, they said this is haram, you cannot say that. But to have birth control, I do believe that's okay. Either at the beginning of the marriage, or at the end, or in the middle, doesn't matter. Allahu Alam.
In a halal group setting, and halal is in quotation marks, so I don't know how to define that. Is it appropriate to joke around with the opposite gender? Remember, it's a halal.
I think
Halal
it's
joke?
if you keep that word halal there, I think it'd be okay.
I guess maybe they mean it's a,
Like this setting.
yes.
If
Maybe,
the, if the sister says something, you joke with her. "Oh,
Yeah, I think you have to be careful because you don't want to offend. You don't know other people's culture. They may not see that joke to be a joke, and if you do that at some work settings, you're going to get another visit from somebody about that joke. So you got to be careful. But I think it just depends on the context of the relationship you know with that person. If you know that person or you're familiar with that culture, some people joke differently. But you just have to be careful and be mindful of the sensitivities. I mean, I wouldn't want to be talking about their dress or, I like this or that, or I see you got, no. I wouldn't do that because it can be offensive. So use caution.
I would just like to go ahead.
Okay, I was going to give the next question. Can a wife leave her husband while she is pregnant?
Leave as in get a divorce?
Yes.
Okay. What was his question again?
Can you joke halal?
Yeah. I would say never. If you're in a situation, say for example, you're in an office or in a mosque or in the parking lot, and so you're out in the open, but it is just you and that sister. I don't think there should be any sort of joke at this situation. If it's a sitting where there's some people around and the joke, as he said, is culturally not flirtatious, it will not be. So if your joke is flirtatious, you're trying to be cute, you're trying to make them think, then that would be wrong. But if it's a general joke that everybody would laugh at, I think that's perfectly okay. Can a sister leave her husband when she is pregnant? This is a subject that the ulama have a lot of discussion on. If a sister came to me and she says, I want a divorce and I'm pregnant, I would be very cautious in this situation. I would not advise her to that. I would advise first for the child to be born, and then after the postpartum, open that discussion up. Wallahu alam, I think this is in their best interest, because the hormones and the changes and the fact that they're now building a family, to destroy that at that point in time, I think is very detrimental to the progress. So I think that we should be very careful with that. I would not advise to that.
And just to be cautious of time, we will be praying Maghrib at 8:30, which is in 10 minutes. So, Jazakallah khair, those are all the questions. I'd like, before we end, if each Imam, Brother Usama will time you, you have 1 minute. If you could just offer one piece of advice or nasiha that you would like the audience to go home with in regards to gender relations, what you think is the most important out of the hour that you've spent tonight, inshallah. And we can start with Sheikh Bassam.
First, we have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have taqwa, and to be serious, and to look at the other, the opposite gender as a human being. They are not boogie or something, boogeyman. And here, the one who is dealing with the sister in the masjid differently than outside, also they are a human being too. And you have to fear Allah at the end, at the beginning and at the end, and you have to follow the shara of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to learn what is permissible, what's not permissible in this. If we follow this, inshallah we'll be safe. Inshallah.
I would add that the ayah, Inna Allah Ghafurur Rahim. Very Allah is the forgiving, merciful. Because, these gender relations and marriage and all these things, this is a life journey. And we're going to be affected by some of these issues. Whether it be you have difficulty controlling your gazes, difficulty in marriage, divorce, interactions. You don't want to beat yourself up over to the point where you lose hope in Allah. You want to look at it, all of it as a journey to get to an end, and to know that Allah is with you. And you got to trust that, because some of these are difficult times no matter what phase you're in, and especially if you're in a single phase. That's a difficult time. And it's again, this is 2013, and it's not a conducive environment for us to keep our adab. It's a daily grind.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I would say for those of our brothers and sisters who are not married, I would let you know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It seems like a struggle. You're being surrounded by a very sexually charged environment that is really pushing this idea all around you, wherever you go. And I was a new Muslim back in 1998. I spent a few years struggling with my identity. And once I got involved in the local mosque, I really felt the comfort zone. And I think that's something we really need to build here in Charlotte. I've seen it in Michigan, I've seen it in Oklahoma, I've seen it in Texas, I've seen it in Florida, where the mosque has a very strong attendance, brotherhood and sisterhood, activities, things that make people feel comfortable are going on. And so there's regular attendance and a comfort zone there. That's very important. The second thing is, whenever I went to Hajj in 2002, and at this point, I don't remember how old I was, 23, 24 years old. The brother says, have you got married yet? And I was like, no, inshallah one day, I need to save some money, job, finish studying and things like this. I was like, why? أَنْكِحُ الْأَيَامَ مِنْكُمْ. There's an ayah in the Quran said, marry the people who aren't married. Go ahead. مَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ مِنْكُمُ الْبَاءَ فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ. Whoever can find a wife, then go ahead and get married, right? It sounded very strange. So culturally, it sounds strange to those of us that are born and raised here. But Islam, that's a reality. So then they said, think of someone. So in thinking of who I might want to marry, they started advising me. The religious, good, nice character, manner, person with, that you believe in a good background, good, you think you're compatible with. So then I thought of my wife. This was in Hajj in 2002. Who became my wife? Believe it or not. And so when I came back, I sent the Amir of the Masjid, this is a Tulsa, Oklahoma way of doing things, and he started talking to her dad. And at first, he was like, no way, right? But over the next 3 years, talking with the family and interacting and all of that, and people getting involved from the community, it ended up happening. And I was on the outside hoping that would happen because I was never told no. In hindsight, culturally, he didn't want to offend me. But in my culture, he didn't put up. He didn't stand up and say what he meant. So I understood that the door is open. So you will find a righteous wife according to a way that is strange culturally. Do not let shaitan fool you, those of you that aren't married, to where you're going around and you can be cordial, respectful, chivalrous, having good character and manners, opening doors for ladies, smiling, not in a flirtatious way, but being nice, the sadaqah of having a good character. But do not ever open the door for a personal relationship with someone that is not someone that you really intend to marry, right? The time is up. For those of us that are married, it's always good to renew our vows. Now this is a cultural thing. We're not saying sharia. It's not bid'ah, okay? I'm not saying do it as a worship act. I'm doing it as a concept. That if there is a stagnance and there's not a strong relationship and there's weakness, we don't need a Valentine's Day to fix that, okay, as Muslims, right? All those ulama differed about Valentine's Day, but that's something we do at any time to try to bring that spark back, bring that relationship, that love, that compassion, that friendliness. Go do something with each other special, talk in the night times, interact with each other. That's something we should do to keep that flame of good marriage alive. Wallahu a'lam. Jazakumullah khair.
Raise your hand if you had a good time and you benefited today. Okay, I want all the, oh wow, you and Imam Naim. I did this quick survey purposely in front of the imams because I want you to see how much we value and respect your time. And alhamdulillah, just sitting here and listening to you, my love and respect, and I think I could speak, inshallah, on behalf of the community, I think our love and respect for you only increases when we see you come together with your differences, with your clarity, with your love for the deen, yet your compassion. And the reoccurring theme I kept hearing, Sheikh Bassam and Imam Naim, Imam Yahya reiterate was the rahmah. Did you notice that? Like, in regards to each question that was being answered, one of them at least hit that nail, and they kept on mentioning how you have to be merciful with each other. And I just like to say on behalf of the Charlotte Muslim Forum and the community, we really appreciate. We greatly benefit from your knowledge and your wisdom, and we hope, inshallah, that we can continue to do these on some kind of basis. And we would really be honored that if you would bring your communities out. We see the diversity, not only in the imams, but if you just take a moment to look around at your neighbors, you see the diversity present in the room. And this is part of the rahmah of the ummah of the Prophet Mohammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And just with that, Sheikh Bassam, we can make a quick closing dua for us, and then inshallah we will have Salat al-Maghrib.
اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك اللهم لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا برحمتك شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يعز من عاديت ولا يذل من وليت تبارك ربنا وتعاليت فلك الحمد على ما قضيت نستغفرك اللهم ونتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خيرا.
I love that shit.
There will be a class on June 28th.